of potential and optimism at the world and intersection of business and the environment and strategic philanthropy. Our roots were Yvonne Chenard and Craig Matthews, founder of Patagonia and Blue Ribbon Flies, respectively, who on a fishing trip 10 years ago realized that companies had a role to play in protecting the planet, and more of them should. The sun, soil, and water for us are the member companies, nonprofits, and consumers in the 1% network. Today there are 1,200 companies in 48 countries giving to 3,300 nonprofits and touching 60 million people. The nurture for 1% is the commitment. And this is important because it is 1% of sales, not profits, but sales. The companies in the network give year in or year out, regardless of whether it's a good harvest or a bad harvest, and no matter the weather, they do it. The last part for 1% is the yield. And to date, the yield has been 100 million given to causes of sustainability.
Yeah.
It is companies like these and others leading the way, acting as role models for others, standing for more than just the bottom line, and making a really good business decision in doing so, because when you give back, it enhances your value in the eyes of consumers. Now, as with any good vine, this one gets better with age, and it's our 10-year anniversary this year, but the next decade holds even more promise. In the next decade will be not only about the giving, but also about the doing. 1% will focus on impact. For us, that happens scaling the network by growing broad and deep. We'll focus in target markets where momentum is greatest: California, New England, New York, woohoo! Yeah. France, Canada, Japan. We'll also offer a new product line play for really big companies so that very large companies can be included in the 1% network. And we'll grow deeply in partnership with companies and nonprofits collaborating in 1% to do together what we cannot do alone. Now this vine, one day, will produce new vintages yet untasted by our palates. And this vine, one day, will grow and see new vineyards in places yet discovered. Henry David Thoreau said, "Convince me you have a seed there, and I am prepared to expect wonders." For more about these wonders, I will turn to those on stage with me, and may I introduce to you our CEO, Terry Kellogg.
Thank you, Melody, for those very kind words. So people often ask, what do we appreciate most, enjoy most about this kind of work? And invariably, the answer comes back to, or at least includes in large part, the kind of people that we get to interact with, and the terms upon which that interaction takes place, the substance of those interactions. And you, my friends, are about to see why in the conversation that we're about to have. So as far as the format here, I'm going to do some very brief introductions of the folks on stage. They each, or at least two of the three anyway, have some opening remarks. If we're so inspired, I might put some questions on the floor for consideration. And then, time permitting at the end, I might share a story of my own. Sound like a plan? Okay. So we're going to start with Dick Parsons here on my immediate right. And Dick, I was concerned that not enough people would be familiar with the small bank that you used to run, or the relatively insignificant media company that might have had something to do with the building that we're in. And so what they really want to hear is how you got from those enterprises to your extraordinary position as a member of 1% for the planet. Because I figured if you and I can help save the planet right here, this is what you're going to be most well known.
Is that a question or a joke?
Maybe both.
All right, so.
How'd you get here?
Okay, so story time. Actually, it started in this building. When I was running Time Warner, one of the things I was committed to doing was to sort of changing the face and complexion of the company, and I realized, after having butt my head against the wall of this is the right thing to do for years, that when you're talking to business people, yeah, the right is not a sustainable model. You have to establish for them that it's in their business interest to do so. So I had the aha moment that brought me to 1% for the Planet. We have a small vineyard in Italy, had it for about a dozen years, and when I bought it, I mean, obviously I live here, I don't live there, and I retained some local people to sort of manage the place for me, as an absentee landlord. And what they did was what people do with absentee landlords. They would come in at the beginning of the season, they bomb it with insecticides and pesticides and stuff like that, so that they didn't have to be out in the fields all the time tending to the vines. And in the process, they killed off all the butterflies and all the bees and all that. But who knew that you needed butterflies and bees? So ultimately, I got sort of another group in there. A family lives on the estate now. Local people, at least the guy who runs the vineyard is local. And he used to weep. No butterflies, and the woods are empty and everything was killed. And he spent his first couple of years sort of detoxifying the place and bringing the butterflies back and bringing the bees back and bringing all the, the fauna that goes with the flora around this place back. And it was only then, and I was like, that's great, but, am I at risk here? But you realize that if you think about Brunello Bob is here somewhere. One of the things people always point to or talk about are the bouquet, the aromas, the perfumes of the wine. Well, where does that come from? It comes from the surrounding areas. It comes from, the interaction between your vines and being in the wood and having flowers present and having butterflies and bees and other animals sort of cross-pollinate and get those aromas and smells and into your grapes. I mean, it's, when you think about it, it's actually like, oh yeah, duh, right? And so it just reminded me that, you can't just keep taking out from something. You have to put back. And when we join 1% for the Planet, what I like your formula. You get to pick the sustainable organization that you want to have your charitable donation directed to. So we picked the Pesticide Action Network because more people have to understand what the impact of these short-term solutions, right? You don't have to work as hard in the vineyard if you could just sort of bomb all the bugs. But what do you give up? Well, you give up an elegant, beautifully balanced, wonderful wine, and probably things I haven't even thought about. So I thought it was a perfect marriage of, an opportunity to put something back in to the ecosystem we're taking out, and on a business basis, make a better wine.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Wonderful story.
Cheers.
Cheers. So Allie and Charles, we just formally met for the first time about a month ago, but I feel like it's been a much longer relationship, and I think that speaks to a lot of things. I'm excited for some of those things to come out here shortly. And I think that probably a lot of people in this audience know something about Screaming Eagle, a venture that you were involved with. But I also know Good. But I know they're very eager to learn more about what Cultivate is all about. Would you be so kind as to share some of that story?
So Screaming Eagle was an exciting time in our life, and it was a real learning curve both on the wine front and on the philanthropy front. And I'm really not a wine person. I'm married to an incredible wine person, and he's brought together amazing, amazing teams, and we've had the great pleasure of learning so much from all of these things. And really, I was horrified to be sharing the stage with Mr. Parsons, and they asked for my background and what would they like me to share. I'm like, oh my word, what, I said, it's like Sesame Street. One of these things is not like the other. Here's the wife. But what I did really well for about a decade was watch and listen. And so these ecosystems that exist, there's so many of them, and the wine ecosystem and the philanthropy ecosystem they live simultaneously. You know, in every charity event you've ever been to, there's wine being poured, and there's a vintner who's been asked to donate, and there are generous people who enjoy wine in their lives and they want to give back, and so it was just this constant intersection. And like Mr. Parsons said, few people got to, share Screaming Eagle, and that was very hard for me. It was so precious and so expensive and really counter to what Charles and I stand for. We love wine to bring people around a table and to celebrate moments and celebrate every day, and so it's very awkward for me, you know, even to my parents, to have to say, I'd love to share it with you, but it's $750. I know it's not really appropriate. And so during this time, when Screaming Eagle would be at these charity auctions, and our lot would come up and the tent would go absolutely bananas, and somebody would write a check for $500,000 for a couple of bottles of wine and a sleepover, you know, under the stars. We had 3 children who we left at home, and we were the dog and pony show out there selling that. And we would get in bed and I would say, you know, I don't really get all that, but that felt really good. I can leave our kids day in, day out to help drive those dollars to things that the world needs. And so then I would say, but only one person wrote that check. And after that bottle would go, the rest of the tent would come up to us, and they would want to touch us as if we had anything to do with it. And I would say, we left money on the table. Everyone in there wanted to give, but the price was too high. Why don't we make a wine that everybody can be a part of giving? And at the time, it really wasn't in the cards, and Charles was very smart and said, not now, not now. And that time came. We ended up leaving Screaming Eagle, and at that time we did sit down together and say, what do we want? And this was the question, what do we want to cultivate in our own life? What do we want more of? And we said we want, more love and more joy and more celebration around the table, and we want more time with our friends and family. And then we said, well, isn't that what everybody wants? So we did Malcolm Gladwell. Like, what we had 10,000 hours at was wine. We knew how to make wine, and we knew we wanted to give back, so could we create something that did that? So out of that, Cultivate was born, and it's a company that was launched in November of last year, and it's higher volumes, lower price point. Let's talk about these businessmen up here. I'm all about feel. Felt really good whenever it was we launched it. People bought it. And last year we were able to give away, for a small startup, a lot of money. And the good news is, when we said we would give away 10% of our revenue in a startup, I am not a business person, but I knew that sounded crazy. But lead with the heart. Like, if you do something crazy and you don't want to fail bad enough, I think you figure out how not to fail. So I'll let him take over.
Well, I used to have brown hair until Allie said 10% of our revenue. Gray immediately. No, I think that for us, we did something that probably, other than Yvonne Chouinard a long time ago, not many business people sit down and say, I want to start a business, and at the core, I want to figure out how we make a difference. It's not just about, profit, or we're not a nonprofit. And so it was really interesting to sit there and say, we want to make a great product, we want to make a profit, and we want to give back. And we felt that there was this rising momentum in the world where we could be in a position to do that. I mean, I like to say that, the world is not a better place because people are drinking cupcake wine, and so if we can replace a wine like that with better wine, better quality, better price, and we make the world a better place, how do you say no to that? And so we really sat there, and it was hard for us to come up with this 10% at first. We I like 1% for the planet. I thought we were really smart.
It was a precedent.
And so, but we, after we looked at it, we looked at what other companies were doing, and coming from the investment business, I really didn't like the nebulousness of a percentage of profits. I just thought that was unfair to our consumer and our customer, and it just too much gray area there. And so we said, we're just going to go straight out of the gate. So we launched this company, and in the first basically 13 months, we gave away $459,000, which was pretty cool, and certainly more than we ever expected. But we had a problem. And the problem was that the way we did it was we set it up where it was online voting. Anybody could vote. You didn't have to buy the wine, you didn't have to drink the wine, you just had to, you could submit a charity and vote. The only thing we said is it had to be like basic human needs and children's charities. It couldn't be like some museum or stuff like that. And it was great, it was a huge success. We were getting 100,000 voters a month. And that was great. Every quarter we were giving away $100,000. And then at the end of the first year, we're kind of like, all right, that was great. And Allie goes, nah, that wasn't really great. And I said, why wasn't it great? She said, well, I didn't cry enough.
I never cried. I cried watching Ty's show where he drives the RV into town and redoes houses. How did I launch a company, do what I said to do, and I cry when I watch Ty give away his money, and we never cried. And I thought, if I don't cry, who's crying, right? I mean,
so then she did cry once, by the way, it was a great story. But that's how we met 1% for the Planet, because we were speaking at a little thing in Santa Barbara, and we met Rebecca there, and she wanted to have a follow-up meeting with us, and we told her, look, we're good at making wine, we're apparently pretty good at selling it, and but we don't feel like we were efficient enough with giving away this money, just giving these people a check and a pat on the back and then we never see them again. It didn't feel like what we set out to do. So we started working with 1% for the Planet, and they obviously like us because we're 10%.
I'm not sure I'm crazy about it.
Peer pressure, it's such a good thing.
But I think for us, and what I think is so amazing is that we're at this time where everyone in here obviously cares about this, and we're at a point where we can create businesses, and there's a whole new generation of businesses being created today that have something more at their heart and soul than just a drive for profit. The drive for profit's part of it. I mean, we talk about sustainability in the wine business all the time, right? I mean, Dick, I know it's the whole reason without all those bees and butterflies, ultimately you're not sustainable. But there's also another element to sustainability, which is if you're in business, you damn well better turn a profit or it's not very sustainable. And so I think it's this really unique opportunity that we have to redefine business in this country. And that 1% is right at the heart of that. And we're seeing how important it is. And I know there are a lot of really big companies, Dick used to run a few of them, that would be very difficult for them to say, we're going to be 1%. They can't do it. We had a restaurant group, Ruby Tuesday. They've got 820 restaurants in this country. They can't give 1%. They can't, first of all, they can't seem to turn a profit, so to give 1%. But what we convince them is that they could have the halo effect of working with us. We don't care if we get credit for giving away the money. We don't feel like it's ours anyway. And so a group like Ruby Tuesday can work with us, help us give away this money, and they get the benefit of supporting small producers or vendors like us. And I think that this generation, it's important that we have the support of the bigger companies so that we can become those bigger companies ourselves, and then we can support more and more. And that's why I thought it was so interesting for us on this journey in the last 18 to 24 months, because you really feel like you're on this wave that you can feel it. And when you sit down with Yvon Chouinard and he tells you what you're doing is cool, that's not much better than that. So that's how we got here.
Outstanding. Amazing stories. Thank you very much for sharing. You've covered so much ground. I suppose the one question I'd love to hear your thoughts on would be, what's next? You've all accomplished so much in your lives, and I imagine those accomplishments don't happen without a long view. And I'd be very curious to hear what's inside that view. Whoever would like to start.
When I grew up, I wanted to run a big bank and a media. Just kidding.
Well, the question is, what's next for who? this is a 1% event. And so the issue is, from my perspective, is what's next for 1% for the planet. I think that, we invited a few people here to hear the story because, as I say, it's sort of axiomatic if you think about it. You can't just keep taking, right? You gotta give something back into the game, right? I just saw a trip to Bountiful, which Cecily Tyson is amazing. And this woman is 87 years old. She jumps around on the stage like it's crazy. But the story when she gets back to this place where she grew up, it's all played out because, quote, the land played out, and everybody had to pick up sticks and move someplace else. If you don't put stuff back, eventually the land plays out, whatever the land might be. And so my hope is that what's next for 1% for our planet is that they become even more widely known than they are. That people understand